chosen one. They kept a secret about you for years that's so explosive, so damning, so absolutely devastating to everyone involved, that when it finally comes to light, and it's about to, it will put multiple people behind bars and change your life forever. Right now, someone who was part of this conspiracy is trembling with fear because they know their time is up, the evidence is overwhelming, and the cosmic hammer of justice is about to come crashing down on everyone who participated in what they did to you. The person who holds this secret about you isn't some distant acquaintance. This is someone who was close enough to witness something that happened when you were at your most vulnerable, when you thought you had found genuine connection in a world that often felt cold and disconnected. What they saw, what they participated in, what they kept silent about, is about to shatter everything you thought you knew about a chapter of your life that you probably remember with mixed emotions. They weren't just witnessing your vulnerability, they were reporting it. Every intimate conversation, every moment of spiritual breakthrough, every time you shared your deepest fears and highest aspirations, all of it was being documented and transmitted to a network of people who saw your awakening consciousness as valuable intellectual property. Years ago, when you were navigating a particularly challenging period of your spiritual awakening, when your heart was open and your defenses were down, you encountered what you believed was love. Maybe it was a romantic relationship that felt profound and meaningful. Maybe it was a group of friends who seemed to understand you in ways no one else had. What you didn't know, what no one told you, was that your authentic emotions were being exploited in the most calculated way imaginable. The person you trusted most during this period was receiving regular payments, substantial payments for maintaining their relationship with you. Bank records exist. Wire transfers were made. Someone kept receipts of every transaction, and those receipts are about to become evidence in a legal case that will expose an entire industry built on the exploitation of awakening souls. The truth that's about to surface will initially shock you, but as the pieces fall into place, everything will suddenly make perfect sense. Those moments when something felt slightly off, but you dismissed your intuition, those conversations that seemed rehearsed, those situations where you felt like you were being watched or evaluated. Your soul was trying to warn you, but your human heart wanted so desperately to believe in the connections you thought you had found. What your soul couldn't tell you then, because the information was too dangerous for your developing psyche to process, was that you were living inside an elaborate psychological experiment designed to map the spiritual development patterns of chosen ones like yourself. What happened to you wasn't random. You weren't chosen as a target because you were weak or naive. You were specifically selected because of your light, because of your spiritual gifts, because of your capacity for deep, authentic love. There are people who specialize in identifying souls like yours, souls who are in the process of awakening to their true power. They know how to spot the signs of someone who is spiritually gifted, but hasn't yet learned to protect their energy. They saw your luminosity, and they decided to monetize it. But the monetization went far beyond simple emotional exploitation. Your spiritual gifts were being studied, catalogued, and potentially replicated through technology you're only beginning to understand exists. The relationship that you remember, the connection that perhaps still holds space in your heart, was not what you believed it to be. Someone was being paid to be in your life. The person you thought cared about you, who shared intimate moments with you, who made you feel understood and valued, was receiving compensation for their performance. Not metaphorical compensation, actual money, regular payments for maintaining the illusion of genuine affection while gathering information about your spiritual abilities, your emotional patterns, your vulnerabilities and strengths. The contracts for these arrangements still exist. The payment schedules were documented. Someone kept track of performance metrics, evaluating how effectively your handler was extracting information and maintaining your emotional attachment to the fabricated relationship. But this deception goes deeper than one false relationship. There was an entire network involved, a group of people who knew exactly what was happening and chose to remain silent. Some of them were direct participants playing supporting roles in this elaborate manipulation. Others were simply observers who watched as your authentic emotions were harvested and catalogued for purposes you're only beginning to understand. They all knew, and they all kept quiet, allowing you to believe in something that was fundamentally false. The network included people you considered friends, mentors you trusted, and authority figures you respected. Each of them was playing a specific role in maintaining the illusion that your spiritual development was happening naturally and authentically. The scope of this betrayal extends beyond personal relationships into something far more sinister. Your spiritual gifts, your intuitive abilities, your capacity for unconditional love were being studied and documented by people who understood their value better than you did at the time. They were creating profiles of chosen ones like yourself, mapping out how awakening souls respond to various stimuli, how they can be influenced, how their energy can be redirected and contained. These profiles weren't academic exercises. They were blueprints for control, instruction manuals for managing and harvesting the spiritual gifts of awakening souls on an industrial scale. What you experienced was part of a larger operation, targeting individuals with specific spiritual signatures. You weren't the only one. There were others, other chosen ones who were identified and subjected to similar psychological operations designed to confuse their spiritual development and harvest their energetic output. Some of these individuals have since disappeared from public view entirely, their light dimmed or redirected through trauma and manipulation. Others have been institutionalized, labeled as mentally ill when they began to recognize the patterns of their exploitation. A few have been recruited into the very network that originally targeted them, their gifts now being used to identify and manipulate the next generation of awakening souls. The person who is about to come forward with this information wasn't just a passive observer. They were actively involved in the deception, which is why their conscience has become such a burden. They have spent years watching you continue your spiritual journey, knowing what was done to you, knowing how your trust was violated, and the weight of this knowledge has finally become unbearable. Recent events in their own life have triggered a spiritual awakening that makes their past actions impossible to ignore, but their motivation for confession isn't purely altruistic. Law enforcement has already begun investigating the network, and cooperation with authorities is their only hope for avoiding the most severe legal consequences. They have been collecting evidence all these years, screenshots of conversations where your emotional responses were discussed and analyzed, financial records showing payments made to your supposed romantic partner, audio recordings of meetings where your spiritual development was planned and managed like a marketing campaign, video surveillance from your most intimate moments, recorded without your knowledge or consent. They kept these receipts not out of sentimentality, but because some part of them knew that one day the truth would need to be revealed, and they wanted to ensure they had proof of what really happened. What they didn't anticipate was that their evidence collection would eventually be discovered by law enforcement, making them accessories to crimes they thought they were merely documenting. The evidence they possess is so comprehensive and damning that law enforcement is already taking notice. The operation you were subjected to crosses multiple legal boundaries, from fraud to psychological manipulation to potential trafficking violations. What began as a personal betrayal is about to become a legal reckoning that will expose an entire network of people who have been systematically targeting and exploiting spiritually gifted individuals. Federal investigators have been building cases against multiple members of this network for months, and your former handler's confession is the final piece they need to begin making arrests. The person coming forward isn't doing this out of pure altruism. They're frightened. Other victims have begun speaking up, connecting with each other, sharing their stories and realizing the patterns. The network that seemed so secure and hidden is unraveling as more people choose truth over complicity. Those who were involved know that exposure is inevitable, and some are hoping that cooperation with authorities might provide them with more favorable treatment when the legal consequences begin. But the crimes they've committed are too severe for plea bargains. The evidence is too overwhelming for reasonable doubt. The victims are too numerous for the courts to ignore. The very qualities that made you a target, your capacity for forgiveness, your ability to transmute darkness into light, your commitment to truth above personal comfort, these same qualities make you incredibly powerful when you step into your authentic authority. The trauma they inflicted was meant to diminish you, but instead it has refined you into something they never anticipated. Every moment of pain you endured has strengthened your ability to recognize deception. Every betrayal you survived has enhanced your capacity to protect others from similar exploitation. Every tear you shed has become a frequency that calls in cosmic justice for all awakening souls. The financial settlements that are already being discussed behind closed doors aren't just compensation for the deception you endured. They represent a cosmic rebalancing, a return of the energy that was stolen from you, multiplied by the universal law that demands justice for those who exploit innocence. The amounts being calculated are substantial enough to completely transform your material circumstances, providing you with the resources to fully step into your mission without the constraints of survival concerns. Insurance companies are scrambling to distance themselves from policies that might cover the network's activities. Corporate sponsors who funded the research are quietly setting aside millions for settlements. Government agencies that turned a blind eye to the operations are preparing for congressional hearings that will expose decades of complicity. More importantly, your role in this entire revelation extends far beyond being a victim seeking justice. Your testimony, your willingness to speak your truth despite the discomfort it might cause, will provide the final pieces needed to dismantle this entire operation. Your voice will be the one that ensures other chosen ones are protected from similar exploitation in the future. But your role doesn't end with testimony. Law enforcement wants you to help them understand how the spiritual manipulation worked, how the psychological operations were designed, how other victims might be identified and assisted. Your expertise, earned through surviving their attempts to control you, makes you uniquely qualified to help dismantle their entire system. The legal proceedings that are about to unfold will be unlike anything you've experienced before. The evidence is so overwhelming that defending against it will be virtually impossible. The people who orchestrated your deception will find themselves trapped by their own documentation, their own recorded conversations, their own financial trails. The very thoroughness that made their operation seem sophisticated will become the mechanism of their undoing. Court dates have already been scheduled. Grand juries are being convened. International law enforcement agencies are coordinating arrests across multiple countries simultaneously. The network's reach was global, but so is the response to their crimes. As this truth emerges publicly, you'll watch as other patterns in your life suddenly make sense. Opportunities that mysteriously disappeared, relationships that ended without clear explanation, projects that were sabotaged in ways you couldn't understand at the time. The interference you experienced wasn't random, it was coordinated, designed to keep you from accessing your full power and stepping into your authentic purpose. Job interviews that went perfectly until you weren't hired. Romantic relationships that ended abruptly when you began to heal from previous trauma. Creative projects that were stolen or sabotaged just before completion. All of it was orchestrated to maintain your dependence on the very network that was exploiting you. The revelation of this conspiracy will initially feel overwhelming, but within that overwhelm is a profound liberation. Every doubt you had about your own intuition will be validated. Every moment when you sensed something was wrong but allowed yourself to be convinced otherwise will finally make sense. Your spiritual guidance system wasn't malfunctioning. It was working perfectly, trying to protect you from deception that was more sophisticated than you could have imagined. Your ability to sense energy, to read between the lines, to know when someone wasn't being authentic, all of these gifts that were dismissed as paranoia or oversensitivity will be recognized as the accurate spiritual intelligence they always were. The people who betrayed you underestimated the very quality they were trying to exploit. Your capacity for love, your commitment to truth, your ability to transform trauma into wisdom, these aren't weaknesses to be manipulated. They're your superpowers. And now that you understand how they were used against you, you'll never be vulnerable to such manipulation again. The network spent years studying your responses to various stimuli, but what they couldn't measure or replicate was the depth of your resilience, the strength of your connection to divine truth, the power of your commitment to authentic spiritual development. The chosen ones who have been through experiences like yours don't emerge as victims. You emerge as warriors of truth, as guardians of authentic spiritual development, as protectors of other awakening souls who might otherwise be targeted by similar operations. Your ordeal wasn't just personal growth material, it was training for a mission that's much larger than your individual healing. You've been prepared through fire to recognize the signs of spiritual exploitation, to identify the tactics used against awakening souls, to provide guidance and protection for others who are just beginning their journey toward consciousness. The sophistication of what was done to you extends into realms that most people cannot even comprehend. The technology employed to monitor your spiritual development included devices you never knew were present, hidden cameras in places you considered sacred and private, audio recording equipment disguised as everyday objects in your living space, biometric monitoring that tracked your heart rate variability during meditation, your brainwave patterns during spiritual practices, your electromagnetic field fluctuations during moments of heightened intuition. They weren't just observing your behavior, they were mapping the measurable effects of your spiritual awakening in real time. Your spiritual practices were being documented with scientific precision. Every meditation session was timed and analyzed. Your prayer patterns were recorded and studied for effectiveness. Your energy healing abilities were tested through staged scenarios where people with fabricated ailments were introduced into your life to see how your natural healing gifts would respond. The results of these tests were compiled into reports that read like technical manuals for spiritual manipulation. Your genuine desire to help others was weaponized into a research methodology that violated every principle of informed consent and human dignity. Chosen one, anyone can listen to messages like these, but few will step into their true power. We are here to help you do just that. The weekly Chosen Ones group calls are now on Zoom, and this is the moment you've been waiting for your entire life. These meetings are literal power vortexes, where destinies are forged, where Chosen Ones unite their consciousness to create something that cannot exist in isolation. This is where everything changes. This is where you step into your greatness. Every week, a doorway opens, but only for those brave enough to step through it. Watcher-level members of the Obsidian Inner Order can experience these transformative sessions live, feeling the energy surge through your entire being. In our most recent gathering, participants were stunned by revelations about the Great Pyramids of Giza as sophisticated ancient power plants, and the shocking truth about Washington, D.C.'s layout perfectly aligning with the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Star Chamber members receive unlimited access to the complete recordings archive, a treasure trove of wisdom that grows more valuable with each passing week. This is your defining moment. The knowledge, the connection, the power that flows through these calls cannot be found anywhere else. Join the Obsidian Inner Order now, link in the description, while the few remaining Star Chamber slots are still available. Your presence is not just welcome, it's necessary. Will you answer the call that has been echoing through your soul? The time is now. The network's reach extended far beyond the immediate circle of people you knew were involved. Academic institutions were receiving funding to study the spiritual development patterns that your case exemplified. Medical researchers were analyzing the neurological changes that occur during authentic spiritual awakening, using data collected from your experiences without your knowledge. Technology companies were developing applications designed to identify and track individuals with spiritual gifts similar to yours. Your private spiritual journey became the foundation for an entire industry dedicated to identifying, monitoring, and controlling awakening consciousness. Corporate executives attended presentations where your case was used as a successful example of long-term spiritual asset management. Charts and graphs display your emotional cycles, your periods of spiritual breakthrough, your moments of doubt and confusion. Investment portfolios were structured around companies developing technologies for consciousness monitoring and spiritual influence. Your most intimate spiritual experiences were being discussed in boardrooms by people who saw awakening souls as an untapped market demographic with immense potential for exploitation and control. Family members were approached with offers of financial incentives to provide information about your childhood spiritual experiences, your early psychic abilities, your emotional vulnerabilities. Some relatives were trained to introduce specific topics into conversations, to create particular emotional states, to reinforce feelings of isolation or confusion when your spiritual development threatened to move beyond their control parameters. The people you should have been able to trust most were turned into unwitting participants in your exploitation. Medical interventions you received during certain periods of your life weren't entirely legitimate. Pharmaceutical prescriptions were influenced by recommendations from network consultants who wanted to observe how various substances affected your spiritual abilities. Surgical procedures included the implantation of microscopic monitoring devices that tracked your physiological responses to spiritual practices. Mental health diagnoses were influenced by assessments designed to pathologize normal spiritual awakening experiences, ensuring that your natural gifts would be interpreted as symptoms requiring treatment rather than abilities requiring development. The network maintained detailed psychological profiles on your family lineage, tracing spiritual gifts and psychic abilities through multiple generations. They identified the specific combination of genetic factors, environmental influences, and karmic patterns that contributed to your particular spiritual signature. This information was used to locate other individuals with similar profiles, expanding their operations to target multiple members of spiritually gifted bloodlines. Your exploitation was part of a multi-generational project designed to study and control the evolution of human consciousness. Advanced artificial intelligence systems were trained using data collected from your spiritual experiences. Machine learning algorithms analyzed patterns in your energy fluctuations, your emotional responses, your psychic impressions, and your healing abilities. These AI systems were then used to predict and influence the spiritual development of other targeted individuals. Your authentic spiritual journey became the training data for technologies designed to artificially simulate and manipulate consciousness itself. The legal ramifications of what was done to you extend far beyond individual criminal charges. International human rights organizations are preparing to file complaints with global tribunals. Constitutional lawyers are arguing that spiritual surveillance represents a new category of civil rights violation, requiring specific legal protections. Medical ethics boards are investigating the unauthorized use of human subjects in consciousness research. The precedents established by your case will reshape legal frameworks for protecting spiritual autonomy and psychic privacy for generations to come. Your spiritual gifts, which they attempted to study and control, have been evolving throughout this entire ordeal. Every violation of your consciousness has strengthened your ability to detect deception. Every attempt to manipulate your energy has enhanced your natural protection mechanisms. Every moment of authentic spiritual experience that occurred despite their interference has become a frequency anchor that other awakening souls can attune to for guidance and protection. They thought they were studying a static phenomenon, but consciousness itself was evolving in response to their attempts at control. As the legal process unfolds and justice manifests in the physical realm, you'll discover that the universe has been orchestrating your vindication for far longer than the recent conscious awakening of your betrayers. Every synchronicity that has led you to this moment, every spiritual download that prepared you for this revelation, every moment of intuitive knowing that something wasn't quite right, all of it has been building toward this cosmic correction. The timing of these revelations isn't coincidental. Other networks targeting chosen ones are being exposed simultaneously around the world. A global awakening is dissolving the systems that have been harvesting spiritual consciousness for generations. The celebration that awaits you isn't just about legal victory or financial compensation, though both of those will manifest abundantly. The real celebration is the reclamation of your authentic spiritual authority, the recognition of your true power, and the stepping into a role where your gifts can be shared freely without fear of exploitation. You'll be invited to speak at conferences, to consult with law enforcement agencies, to help design protective protocols for awakening souls. Your survival of their attempts to control you qualifies you to help others recognize and resist similar manipulation. Years from now, when other chosen ones find themselves in similar situations, your story will be the beacon that guides them toward truth. Your willingness to face this darkness and transform it into light creates a pathway for others to follow. The network that targeted you believed they were harvesting your energy for their own purposes, but what they actually did was refine you into a force of cosmic justice that will protect countless others from similar exploitation. Your pain became your purpose, your trauma became your training, your betrayal became your blueprint for protecting others. The person who is about to confess their involvement in your deception thinks they're seeking redemption through their revelation. What they don't realize is that their confession is simply the final piece in a puzzle that the universe has been assembling for years. Your vindication was always assured. The only question was the timing, and now that timing has arrived with the precision that only divine orchestration can provide. The cosmic court has been in session throughout your entire ordeal, gathering evidence, preparing testimony, ensuring that when justice finally manifests, it will be complete and undeniable. This is your moment, chosen one. The truth that was hidden is about to set you free in ways that transform not just your understanding of the past, but your entire trajectory toward a future that finally aligns with your authentic power and purpose. The person pacing their room at 3 in the morning, clutching evidence of your exploitation, represents the beginning of your vindication, but you standing in your truth, claiming your power, stepping into your role as protector of other awakening souls, you represent the transformation of every chosen one who refuses to let darkness win. The secret they kept about you for years is about to become the testimony that sets countless others free.